Pastor Kelly, would you, as always, start us off with a prayer?
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time we have tonight together in this place to hear from our Lieutenant Governor, and we thank you for his dedication and service these years and his commitment. We look forward to what he has for us tonight, and I pray for him. I pray for him not just in this moment as he speaks to us, but as he serves our state, that you would give him, as well as all of those who serve with him in the state, safety and protection. We know that safety is of the Lord, and we ask that your mercy would be on our state and on our elected officials. And Lord, not just for their safety, but also for wisdom. And Lord, we're grateful that by looking to you, we can have wisdom. And they face a lot of decisions, a lot of questions for which they need answers. And so, Lord, I pray that you would give him wisdom as he seeks to serve you in this place where you've put him. We thank you for this time, and we pray that our speech and our questions and our responses would be such that would be honoring and glorifying to you. And Lord, tonight I can't help but think of those who are mourning tonight in Sutherland Springs, and for the many families tonight who are facing very difficult and trying situations. And we pray and we ask that you would give continued comfort and strength as that community begins to pick up and rebuild from such a tragic moment. And we ask that you would show mercy on our nation and our country. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Amen.
Is that me? I think you got me a little bit loud. Turn me down a little bit, please. What has went on in Texas this past week is unimaginable. How do you... Please keep those folks in your prayer. I know one gentleman is burying 8 or 9 members of his family. I was talking to John about this a day or two ago. That family, forgive me, I can't think of the name of the family right offhand, but there's a GoFundMe page. I haven't been able to find it yet, but as soon as I do, I'll put it up on our webpage and our Facebook page. So if it's in your heart to help a man that's having to bury his whole family, give what you can to help them out. Would you all stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before I go any further, just recognize a few folks in the room. Cheryl, the chairman of the Anderson County GOP, thank you for coming. Senator Rex Rice, thank you for always being here and supporting us. It means a lot to me, and I really do appreciate it.
You're here.
Former candidate Jeff Willis, and avid Clemson fan, thank you for coming. And Alex Sager, where is Alex? Did he leave the room for a moment?
He stepped out.
He stepped out. And Mr. Winchester, one of the finest gentlemen in Pickens County with the Taxpayers Association here. Nobody stands up for your protection on taxes more than that gentleman right there. If they're trying to tax you unjustly, this man will let you know about it. Always. Thank you, Mr. Winchester. Well, I'm not going to stand up here and make a speech of any kind. One thing, we'll do questions here in a second with the Lieutenant Governor. I won't give you rules, but I would give you a request, suggestion. Just be polite. Ask what you want to ask, but get to the point. Go to your point, and be polite. That's all we ask. Now, to introduce Kevin is an easy job. And I did it again. It is hard for me to call him Lieutenant Governor or Senator or whatever. Kevin's a friend. And in the job I have as chairman, I don't think it's a good idea for me to endorse, because I want anybody that comes here to feel like they're welcome. I don't want them to feel like they're coming to an enemy camp. And to be honest, there's nobody in the Republican field so far that I'd want to say anything against. Well, better stop there. There's 3 Republican candidates that I have a lot of respect for. But Kevin is a good Christian man. I know you to be a good family man and a good Christian man, and I know your voting record. If you go to the American Conservative Union website and look up the rankings in our state legislature, his last year in the legislature, they're the 3 top conservative senators in South Carolina were Lee Bryant, Kevin Bryant, and Tom Davis. That's an absolute fact. Never voted for a tax increase in his career. And the last time I said that to you, you said, and never will. So, without belaboring the point, the Lieutenant Governor of South Carolina, Kevin Bryant.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Rick, since we're first-name friends, I appreciate that. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I appreciate all of y'all coming and being involved in the political process. I'd like to ask if those of you who are veterans or first responders or family of veterans or first responders, if you could please raise your hand. Thank you. Thank you. You know, when I think of veterans and I think of first responders, fighting for our freedoms, putting your life in harm's way so we can live free. And the First Amendment free speech, we can have an open discussion and we can say whatever we want to say about our government. You can say whatever you want to say about me, you're elected official. You can say whatever you want to say about Senator Rice. You have the freedom to do that. And when we hear things, and I know the left gets unhinged way too often, but consider the alternative. Consider the poor folks in North Korea. If they speak against their government, they could be punished and possibly killed. So just remember to embrace free speech, whether we agree or whether we don't agree. And I also remind myself, as the left is getting nasty and unhinged, don't stoop to their level. Just stick to the facts and be polite. And first of all, that's the way we're supposed to treat each other. And second of all, you can't ever convince someone your side of the issue if you're being insulting. And that's something that they're really not learning. I have my much better half, Ann, here. Ann, if you'll raise your hand. And I appreciate the prayer. And I'm just going to tell y'all, I've had the opportunity to preach the gospel in several churches around South Carolina, and when the pastor comes up, he says, "How can we pray for you?" And Ann always steps in, and she says, "Pray that Kevin learns humility." Now, why in the world would she ever say that? I don't know. But I'm blessed to have Ann. We have 3 children. Got a sweet daughter-in-law, and they're all in Anderson. I am also a pharmacist. So, Rick, you have before your crowd a politician and a drug dealer. That's about as bad as it gets. But I'm glad to be here, and y'all know me. Y'all know my record. I didn't come here to pander. I came here to give you my record, and it's a crystal clear conservative record. And I'm very proud of that record, and we'll be telling you a little bit about that, and then we'll open up for questions. The other day, speaking of veterans, I had the honor to meet this gentleman, George Lusala. George just turned 95, and he still lives at home. He fought in World War II. He fought in the Korean War, in Vietnam, and he still lives at home. And look at all the medals and the awards that George had gotten. How about that? That was just an awesome, honorable. It was an honor for me to be able to visit with him and award him the Palmetto Patriot. Y'all have noticed that the media seems to give Trump a hard time. They can't compliment him on anything that he does. If President Trump came and went to Lake Hartwell and walked on water, CNN would probably report that the president can't swim. They just can't give him a break, but I've been so impressed with what he's done. with him speaking up for you, the taxpayer, and going against the establishment and going against the trough dwellers and the lobbyists and the politicians. And I've been impressed, and I've been impressed with the judges that he's appointed. Great judges, and those are lifetime appointments. Doing a great job. As a pharmacist, I understand Medicaid. Medicaid spending is growing at an unsustainable rate. We have got to cut Medicaid spending, and we've got to put in work requirements, and we've got to make sure those who are able to work do not receive welfare. Because then you're subsidizing laziness. And you know what happens when you subsidize laziness? You get more laziness, and we've got to stop doing that. Understand the opioid epidemic, which is crippling South Carolina and every other part of our country. And I understand what it's like to run a small business. And I understand the crippling effects of regulation on small business. I'm a big believer in free markets. You're here eating Butts has good barbecue, not because of some government. If you don't enjoy your dinner, you've got other options. But I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad you're supporting Mutts. I did serve 12 years in the Senate before becoming your lieutenant governor. We have the Office on Aging. I've had this simple philosophy: promoting your liberty and protecting your wallet. And there's a 12-year record that says that. And I would also like to just remind you that when the penny didn't fix education, when the cigarette tax didn't fix Medicaid, the gas tax is not going to fix your roads. The Republican-controlled legislature passed on you the South Carolina's largest tax increase in history. Can you believe that? We have a Republican majority, but we do not have a conservative majority. And let me tell you why the gas tax isn't going to fix your roads. It's the structure of the Department of Transportation. How many people here can tell me they've seen a football team successfully use 2 starting quarterbacks? Doesn't work. The DOT is like a football team with 3 head coaches and 9 starting quarterbacks. You don't know who to hold accountable. And there are way too many decisions based on politics than on public safety and traffic flow. How many people in this room have driven from Florence to Pamplico? How many people have you? Who knows where Pamplico is? There's a $350 million 5-lane highway from Florence to Pamplico. So next time you hit a pothole, you just think about where your money's going. The DOT needs to be in a cabinet agency under the governor so you know who to hold accountable. And I will tell you that if you honor me to be your governor, or if somebody else is governor, it needs to be in a cabinet agency under the governor. And I'm going to tell you how the cabinet model works so well. The Department of Employment and Workforce, DEW. In the past, this agency was an agency that would hand out checks to the unemployed. That is all they did. If you're unemployed, they just pay you to not work. Here again, we're subsidizing laziness, and we're getting more laziness. And when Governor Haley appointed a new director of that agency, the culture changed overnight. That agency was a check writing agency with your money, and it became a jobs agency. So now, if you're unemployed and you go to the DEW, they find you a job. So one, it restores the dignity of the individual that's unemployed because they're working hard and providing for themselves, and they're providing for their families. And also, your tax. We have seen a 20% reduction in taxes. So I'm a big believer in the cabinet agency. We live in a legislative state. We have the weakest governor in the country. This is not the current governor. This is the executive branch. We have the strongest legislature and the weakest executive branch in the country. And there's supposed to be a separation of powers. A legislative branch, a judicial branch, and the executive branch. And we have a legislative state that controls all those branches. And we need to get away from that. When the tax collectors and the trough dwellers spend your money like it belongs to them, instead of you, that reflects the need to restore integrity in your government. When the tax collectors and trough dwellers send money to Planned Parenthood, that reflects a need to restore integrity in your government. As Lieutenant Governor, I'm also the President of the Senate, and it's my job to ratify acts. I have ratified many bills I would not have voted for, but I gave the legislature a warning. If there is one penny of your tax dollars going to places like Planned Parenthood who sell body parts, if there's one penny in that budget that goes to Planned Parenthood next year, it will not be ratified by me. When the tax collectors and the trough dwellers create databases, when you get a prescription for a seizure, you're in a database. When you go to the drugstore and buy cold medicine, you're in a database. When you go to a payday lender, you're in a database. When the tax collectors and trough dwellers and politicians want to put you in a database because you give your money to an issue advocacy group, that reflects the need to restore integrity in your government. And I'm telling you, that's coming. They call it dark money. I call it a violation of your First Amendment rights to free speech. And I call it the Incumbent Protection Act. Because whether you give to a very conservative group, whether you give to the NRA, whether you give to a very liberal group, that's your business. And it's not government's role to take that money, take your money, take your information and put them in a database. But that's what they want to do. And you know, in the 50s, they tried to do this. They tried to find out who was contributing to the NAACP because they wanted to harass those donors. And the Supreme Court said this is unconstitutional. I've actually filibustered this on more than once because it's a violation of free speech. When the tax collectors and the trough dwellers drop debt bombs on you, that's worse than raising your taxes. That's not taxing you, that's taxing your children and grandchildren. When the tax collectors and the trough dwellers do all these backroom deals behind your back, that reflects a need to restore integrity in your government. Your government needs to be returned to you, the taxpayer. And we also need to restore integrity in the election process. There is a candidate who has claimed that they are the only candidate that is not tied to the ring of corruption in Colombia. And I will set the record straight. I have never had a single association with Richard Quinn, the center of the ongoing grand jury investigation. We have had a grand jury investigating in Colombia nearly 5 years. The FBI has been in Colombia for several months. There have been indictments, there have been convictions, there have been removals of office, and there have been guilty pleas. That reflects a need to restore integrity in your government. Let's talk about the integrity and the character of South Carolina. Gentlemen still open doors for ladies. We still pull over for funerals. We still say yes sir and no ma'am. That reflects the true character and integrity of South Carolina. We've seen the 1,000-year flood. We saw Hurricanes Irma, Hurricane Matthew. We saw the ice storms. We saw neighbors helping neighbors. And that reflects the true character of South Carolina. Remember the Charleston Massacre? When those folks went to prayer meeting on a Wednesday night? And this murderer went and killed 9 innocent people? I was astounded. I was shocked and I was impressed when family members of one of those victims that was murdered showed up just a few days later to that racist murderer and offered their forgiveness and pointed that man to Christ. That really reflects the character and integrity of South Carolina. Your government does not reflect the integrity and character of South Carolina. There is a culture of corruption in Columbia. We have a website, kevinbryant.com. I would love for you to check us out. I would love to have your consideration, and I would love to serve you as governor. I would love to return your government to you, the taxpayer. kevinbryant.com. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. And what do I bring to the table? I understand small business. I understand the crippling effects of regulation on small business. I understand health care. and I know how to cut Medicaid spending, and I know what we need to do to deal with the opioid crisis. And I also have a 12-year clear conservative record. You hear candidates say a lot of the same things, but I have a record to back up everything that you'll hear. And before I close, I do want to bring up one thing that you will hear that's propaganda. When we talk about defunding Planned Parenthood, the propaganda is you're taking away access of health care. This picture here is of the federal qualified South Carolina that do. So just remember that when you hear the propaganda of when they say we can't defund Planned Parenthood. One of the last things I did before I left the Senate was I sponsored Personhood, which defines life at conception. And hopefully we can pass that. Those are all the prepared remarks I've had. God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, so I would take as many questions that y'all would like to ask at this time, and we're here to chat for as long as y'all want to talk.
Kind of elaborate on how that works. That money walks in your door competitively. And by the way, I defended you on Facebook. You didn't even know that probably, but I did.
Thank you.
Probably didn't change anybody's mind because nobody ever has, but you know.
Yeah, I'd be glad to answer that. Several things. One is I accept Medicaid and I accept the state health plan at our pharmacy. And y'all have seen y'all know how expensive prescription drugs are. Y'all know how expensive customized wheelchairs are for quadriplegic kids. The media portrays like $17 million went straight into my pocket. Unfortunately, that's not the case. I've got a helicopter outside if you want to go take a ride. Another thing is I have been reporting the dollar amount of those contracts before legally required. And it's yeah.
The people have the right to go anywhere they
Absolutely.
want with that money, right?
Yes, yes.
You literally compete against CVS.
There are
Walgreens.
7 retail drugstores within a mile and a half from our store. And yes, and any drugstore in the state can participate. There's nothing exclusive. And I can document every prescription and every piece of equipment that we've sold. There's no secret deal that I got. We just are a provider, and I disclose that information. And actually, you will see there's been several times where I have cut spending on Medicaid. I've cut spending. I've cut the rates of reimbursement. I've cut the rates that providers, the percentage on reimbursement. And I've even gone further. There's a subsegment of Medicaid called the CLTC, Community Long-Term Care, and the supplies they get. I went to Medicaid and told them, your reimbursement's way too high, you need to cut it, and I suggested 30%. So I have a record of cutting Medicaid, and the most recent article told the whole story, but there have been some that didn't tell the whole story. But thank you for bringing that up, and I'm more than happy to answer to it. Thank you.
You know what I'm saying? When you made that statement, you said you were not defunding. What's the word you use?
Cutting Medicaid.
Somebody's going to take that soundbite and say you're cutting Medicaid instead of saying you're cutting in reimbursements.
I voted to cut Medicaid spending, and I have also voted to cut the reimbursement rates to providers.
Which gave you less money.
Yes.
That was my point. Somebody loved that soundbite.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
I've got one for you.
Sure.
Comes up around here a good bit. Local government fund.
Mm-hmm.
Every time there's a debate about spending money in the county, or the county doesn't have enough money, and they're wanting to raise taxes, local government comes up. Local government fund from the. In other words, the state government sends money to the counties for state-mandated services that the county provides. Well, the state has not been sending the amount of money that by statute that they're supposed to send to the counties, which puts counties in a hole by several $1 million a year, and then we end up having to make up the difference that the state's supposed to pay on the county end. So what can we do about that, or what's your answer?
There is a formula in statute and it's called Aid to Local Subdivisions. That's local government fund. And every year the House of Representatives puts in a proviso which suspends that law, and they don't fund it full. I think it's only funded like 50%. And I feel like it's wrong, and it's wrong to not follow the statutes. We can have a debate of whether that percentage or that formula is right or wrong, but if it's in the statute, we need to follow it. And I will point, 12 years I have supported fully funding the aid to local subdivisions.
I appreciate you saying that, because it ends up, we're getting, from my point of view, you tell me if I'm wrong. From my point of view, it's like double taxation. We're paying the state for the services, but the services aren't being paid for on the state end. We're not getting the money, so we end up having to pay for it out of county monies that should be going somewhere else for county services instead of the county paying for state services. Is that?
Well, it's two things. You can hold the closer the government, the closer the spending is to the taxpayer, the better. You can hold your county council more accountable than you can in Columbia. That's one thing. Another thing is, I believe the counties know how to spend that better than Columbia. Another thing is, it's hypocrisy that the legislature would break the law every single year. Now, maybe the formula's wrong. Maybe it's too much. Maybe it's too little. We ought to have a debate. We ought to set that formula. If it needs to be changed, maybe it needs to be changed. I don't know. But we need to follow the statute. We need to follow the law, and it's hypocritical for the legislature to do that.
I would say the same thing on education funding. Same thing happens.
Same thing. And that's classroom funding too.
Absolutely, and I'm with you. If the funding, if the legislators in Columbia feel that the statute gives the schools too much money from the state, then debate it and change it. But as long as that's the statute and there's a formula and you're supposed to send this amount of money per student to the county, that's what you're supposed to do. If you don't want to do it, change the law. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make a speech.
No, that's fine. That's perfectly fine. The education formula is in statute and should be fully funded, or the statute should be changed. Here again, I have voted to fully fund that stream for 12 years. There's always an amendment put up on the Senate side, and I've always voted for it. And the interesting thing is, these folks will vote against that amendment and then say they're champions of education, champions of local government, but they won't vote for that amendment. And I will say that your Senator Rex Rice does everything in Columbia what he says here. So when I talk about the politicians in Columbia, I'm not including you, Senator from Pickens. I just want to make that clear. Yes, sir.
I'm Roger Tasso. I'd like to know what procedures it would take to change South Carolina's government into like the other states.
Well, it's a mountain. It is a challenge. But is there anybody in here that disagrees with me that the DOT should be a cabinet agency? I have given this illustration all over the state, every corner of the state. We've been all over the state several times, and I've made this statement and given this illustration probably 100 times, and I have yet to find a single taxpayer disagree that the DOT needs to be a cabinet agency. So I'm taking the message to the people. Back in 2008, Governor Sanford took the same message to the taxpayer. The taxpayers got involved with their legislature, and we had an amendment in the Senate to do this very thing, make the DOT a cabinet agency, and it only failed by one vote. And the issue wasn't near on the radar in 2008 than it is now. So I believe when you take the message to the taxpayer gets engaged, and the General Assembly will respond.
Got another question over here.
Reading score at the public schools in South Carolina, about 75%, according to their own standards, read at grade level. So 25% of the kids don't read at grade level, and it's been that way for as long as I've been looking, which has been 15 years. Usually you get a new reading program every 2 or 3 years. Now it's Read to Succeed, and you get now technology. Everybody's getting new technology, new buildings, and nothing's changed it. What's your solution to improve reading scores in education in South Carolina?
Well, the first thing we need to do is offer school choice. We do have a little bit of school choice in South Carolina for exceptional needs children. There was an amendment, 2013, I believe it was. Senator Larry Grooms from Berkeley offered a budget amendment offering school choice to every child in South Carolina, and we fell short on the votes. That would have been a touchdown. I came back with school choice for exceptional needs children, and we won. We passed that. And the opposition to school choice is nothing like the way it used to be. So giving parents control of their child's education is the first thing we need to do. The next thing we need to do is stop micromanaging the classroom from Columbia. There are more than 86 education formulas coming from Columbia with mandates. And we've got to free up teachers to teach and put some free market competitive principles into the education. So those are my two solutions to education in South Carolina. Thank you for the question.
So your choice would be to expand special ed,
My choice would be have school choice for every child in South Carolina. We don't have that. We have it for exceptional needs. If we can't get it all, let's expand. Let's go to another, and I hate to put children in categories because all children are special and individual, but a good way to expand that would be children of active duty military. They're in very unique situations. They get moved all around. A lot of folks on the bases that we've met have told us they would like to have school choice. Maybe foster children ought to get school choice.
the category where there's the least resistance from the establishment. Special ed is a very different, like a curveball that's really hard to hit for the traditional system. So I think they were probably, I wouldn't say glad, but they were not as resistant. Children that are reading behind by at least a grade or two are very difficult on the system, and I think you get less resistance if you went with a program where you said any child that's behind by more than a year on the SC Ready scores, you're going to get school choice.
Sure,
you'd get a lot less resistance. That
right.
way.
Go and if we can't get it all, let's go incremental.
If you just say every child, they're going to say, "Wow, you just we could lose a quarter of our students."
Well, the ultimate goal is every child, but you've given us a good option to expand. Another option is children of deployed military. That'd be hard for a politician to vote against, to give them school choice. So there are several options that are out there, and we're going to try to do that.
Okay, I've got a question.
Yes, sir.
About the high power rates of South Carolina.
Yes, sir.
It's been noted that our people in South Carolina, we are a relatively poor state, pay the highest power rates in the nation. Then we have seen and heard and listened to so much about the Santee Cooper problem with closing down those nuclear plants under construction. My question basically is sort of like this. Do you support selling Santee Cooper? Do you support rolling back and doing away with that law that sort of guarantees there's no risk I think that was put in 2007, where the people of South Carolina, the ratepayers, already have to fund those kinds of projects, risky projects. And we've been done in South Carolina. So what is your position to correct all of this? I call it a mess. It's a scam on South Carolina, and I am really put out with the fact that our legislature did that to us, sir. And just give us your ideas on this. I would appreciate it very much.
The first
Governor.
thing I need to do is tell you that I was gullible in my first year, and I voted for the Baseload Review Act. It was my first year. We're getting all this information. Oh, the ratepayer's going to be protected. The ratepayer's got safeguards, blah, blah, blah. And we were lied to. We were lied to. Where do we go from here? Do I support selling Santee Cooper? Eventually, yes. Limited government guy, I think government should be out of the utility business. But selling it right now at its low value would not be a good idea, because now it's a state agency and it's got several $1 billion of debt, and you, the taxpayer, would have to take care of that debt, and it wouldn't be good for the ratepayer or taxpayer to sell it now. But there does need to be a plan to sell it. And I am absolutely supportive in repealing the Baseload Review Act and putting in some safeguards, because right now it's backwards. If you're a shareholder in SCANA, you get to benefit from the profits. But you chose to be an investor, and that's how the market works. But if you're a poor ratepayer, you're the one that has to bear the burden of the risk. And that is totally backwards. And it is wrong, and it needs to be fixed. And it was just awful. We were sold a bill of goods, and we were told there were protections, and there's some vague language of protections in there, but it's not near strong enough.
Governor, I would suggest that selling Santee Cooper, there's a lot. They've issued a lot of bonds. They borrowed a lot of money to put into these plants, and we know it's a bad deal. We've pretty much all of us know about that. Why don't we sell Santee Cooper and pay off that, and then roll back those rates that's been laid on the people of South Carolina to pay it off? In other words, sell it, take that money, and pay off these bonds, all the debt. We know that Santee Cooper is loaded with debt. Let's get rid of that debt. Sell it and get rid of that thing.
Well, I would
clean up this mess. And I'm speaking to you too, Mr. Rice.
I agree that we need to sell it. We need to pay off the debt. We need to get rid of it. But it does, if we give it some time, it could be more valuable and more beneficial to wait to sell it. I believe selling it right this minute would be a mistake. We need to get the value up and then sell it, pay off the debt, get out of the utility business. And yes, I do support no more rate increases, and the ratepayer ought to be paid back. That baseload review, if that Baseload Review Act contained language that was a rock-solid rebate to the ratepayer if VC Summer failed, we wouldn't be having this conversation. And I'm going to tell you, there's been a federal grand jury, SLED's involved, and we may very well find some criminal activity going on in that mess. I do believe we will. There's been some stock sales very quickly at a convenient time. So there's a lot of smoke, and I believe we're going to find out that there might have been some criminal activity. Thank you for bringing it up. Yes, sir.
Welcome back to Pickens County.
Great to be here.
I've seen you a couple of times. I'm Alan Quinn, lifelong resident from Pickens County, and my concerns, I've asked several of the candidates that have come by, is about the Heritage Act in South Carolina, and it takes 2/3 of the House, 2/3 of the Senate to pass that. So it takes the governor basically out of the picture if it passes. They use that to take the flag down, and I've got a two-part question, but what were your feelings and position on taking the flag off of the State House grounds?
I did vote to take the state flag, the flag off the State House grounds, and I'll tell you my thought process. Had a hard time with this one. The veterans that built the monument after the war, it's been in 3 places. It's been near Fenway Park, it's been on the side of the State House, and then it was moved to where it is now. And not one of those times did the veterans put a flag on the monument, the veterans themselves. Had they, that would have changed my position. The flag wasn't put on the State House until 100 years after the war. Had the veterans put it up there then, that would have changed my position, but I wasn't in the legislature when it was moved from there. So it's because of the history of the veterans is why I voted the way I did on the flag being removed from the monument. As far as the Heritage Act actually could be rescinded with a majority vote. With a majority. You don't have to, you have to, right now you have to have 2/3 to move a monument or a street name and all that. But the Heritage Act itself could be rescinded with a majority vote. And I believe the 2/3 needs to stay intact. So if I'm governor and we get a bill to rescind the Heritage Act, I would veto it.
Okay, the second part is that covers all monuments. World War I.
It covers all monuments. Yes, sir.
Vietnam War.
Yes, sir.
The Confederate monuments.
And even street names.
Right. And it's it's strong. I agree. 2/3. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's a group in Greenwood that wants to change one of the monuments, World War II monument down there, or one, World War I or II.
It's one.
Okay. And Jay Lucas said nothing's going to be entertained this year that may be entertained next year. And there's also, I don't know if it's the same group in Greenwood, have taken it to court to try to claim that it's unconstitutional. What would be your stance on if they try to take any of our monuments, including Confederate monuments, down?
Well, the monument in Greenwood is World War I, and it acknowledges white veterans and colored veterans. And the folks in Greenwood just want the names of the veterans listed. And we can look at it a couple of different ways. One is, it's not fair to segregate veterans. Blood is red, and the veterans, whether they were black or white, need to be honored. But also, that's what we did at that time, and we need to learn from that history and appreciate the fact that we don't segregate now. I also look at it as, if a bill like that were to get some traction, it's a perfect vehicle to throw on all kind of amendments to change other stuff. So I'm a little skeptical of that. We can also look at it the third way, is let Greenwood decide what they want to do with it. I'm reluctant to see that bill get any movement, because I'm worried not so much about that monument, because I kind of see both sides on that argument. But I'm worried that if that bill started moving, then it might be a vehicle to take down, who knows? I mean, people are even protesting Christopher Columbus, for crying out loud. I would hate to see a bill like that, which, you know, I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with changing that, but it could be a vehicle and open up a can of worms that I don't think we want to do.
I don't agree with changing it, because I think that was the history, and that's what it shows. I will finish with that. I want to add one thing to what Mr. Winchester said. I was in the nuclear industry at Oconee Nuclear Station for 30 years, and the best thing to do is get rid of that thing right now. It's going to go down in value because they can't preserve it. I don't think they're going to be able to finish it. It's going to take too much money. I hate to say it, I think the nuclear industry is pretty much dead in the United States, and I'm not sure that we shouldn't go ahead and get rid of that thing.
Well, I'm for doing what's best for the ratepayer and the taxpayer, and you know, I'm certainly open to getting rid of it now if you can convince me that's the best thing to do. But from the information we've gathered so far, I believe that Santee Cooper needs to be sold down the road, but not immediately. V.C. Sumner is probably not going to be recovered, but there is some talk on mothballing it for like $10 million a year instead of selling the parts, because it may be valuable someday down the road. But I want what's best for the ratepayer and the taxpayer, and if you can show me reason that it needs to be sold now, I'd certainly be open to that. I don't want the government to be in the utility business. It should never be there. And with technology, who would have ever thought you'd have so many options with your telephones? And now we have so many options. There is new technology that we're going to have a lot more options in our energy, and we're going to have free market principles in our energy very soon. And I'm looking forward to that. And I would do whatever possible to put free market principles into our energy. But thank you for your comments.
Governor, thank you for coming out tonight. I have a quick question
Sure.
for you, and you probably hear it a good bit. You even mentioned it, that we have a Republican legislature. We just don't have a conservative legislature.
You're exactly right.
Myself, along with some others, I know Stacey Shea up in Greenville. She's an advocate for it. There are a lot of people advocating for closed primaries. What would you, as a governor, do about that? Would you use your bully pulpit to push for closed primaries to get people such as, to name names, Lindsey Graham out of office, who are riding the backs of Democrat voters into office? Would you do anything about that? Absolutely.
I'll tell you, I'm a political activist myself. I've been party chairman. I've been involved in the party. I've been burned by helping Republicans on what they campaign on and seeing them change when they get in office. And I don't call it closed primary. I call it registration by party. We need to have registration by party, and I've been for that for 20 years. Absolutely would love to see registration by party. I remember even one time during the motion period, I made the motion to pull it out of Judiciary Committee because it couldn't ever get a hearing. We didn't get the votes, but we did have a record of those voting to pull it out of Judiciary Committee. But I'm with you all the way. Democrats have no business voting in Republican primaries. Republicans have no business voting in Democrat primaries. It's not a general election. It is a partisan primary nomination. And in Senate District 3, in 2016, 2,000 people voted in the Republican primary that voted earlier in February for either Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton. So you're absolutely right. I am all for registration by party.
Lieutenant Governor?
Yes, sir.
Turn me down a little bit, John. It got a little bit loud. At the last executive committee meeting of the South Carolina Republican Party, there was a resolution passed unanimously. I was appointed to the committee by state president to try to move through something on or the resolution through the State House and get support for it. Basically, what this one does would just be to add a box when you register to vote, where you have the choice to begin with. Wouldn't be mandatory, but to begin with, to check the box of what party you want to be affiliated with. You say, what does that accomplish? Well, it accomplishes a couple of things. One, it'll give us a better idea of when people vote. There'll be a record of, if there's crossover, we can see it after you vote. And we would be able to also come in at a party gathering like this and have people re-register and pick their party affiliation. It would be the first step in an incremental way to get registration by party. It's not getting the whole thing at one time, but it is moving the ball down the field.
Yes, I was in a meeting with Chairman McKissick just the other day, and he was telling me about that, and I would be supportive of that, too. That'd be a small step in the right direction.
I said President. I should have said Chairman Drew McKissick. Sorry. And Senator Rice has sponsored a bill in the Senate for registration by party, too. So we have a lot of support in the room for it.
I support that.
Governor.
Yes. Hey.
When you try to talk about education in South Carolina, and I think this is still current, and you're talking about the fact that we're like midways when it comes to money that we give for each student, but we're way down at the bottom when in outcome. People generally come up with this thing about, well, we test them different. Like in South Carolina, we test every student, and in North Carolina, and I have heard this from a North Carolina teacher, they select people, and that makes it come out better for them. But if that is true, and if that has anything to do with these statistics, can it be changed, or is that just in the Department of Education? They need to make that decision.
Yeah, and there are some states that test differently than others, but just about every category shows us close to the bottom, and we're 23rd on how much we spend on education in South Carolina compared to the other states. So money's not the answer. It's just like the gas tax. You're pouring money in a bucket with holes in it. So I still believe that deregulating the classroom for Columbia and school choice, giving parents options, and it also gets parents more involved in their education when they have choices too. Charter schools, homeschool, private school. Parents ought to be able to decide where their tax dollars go. And here again, the propaganda pumps will say that you're taking money out of public education. The school choice proposals only takes a third of the allocation with that student. So 2/3 of the money stays in the public system. So it increases per pupil funding, and it decreases the classroom size. So we're only asking for a third. I'm only asking it's really not really fair, but we feel like that's the best we can get. We're only giving a parent a third of their tax dollars for their child, but that's the answer. And every single place where school choice has been tried, education goes up in the public sector because the public schools now have to compete. The parent and child is now the customer. And there was a debate on the floor, and a member said, well, what happens if a failing school closes? It closes. The parents have chosen to take their child somewhere else, and that school needed to close. So free market principles work in every other way, and it'll work in education.
And one other question, does the Heritage Act protect the names of any buildings on college campuses?
I'm pretty sure it does, yes.
Okay, like Tillman
Mhm.
Hall?
hmm
Okay.
Yes.
I'm Zach Quinn. Earlier, you called the state legislative state
Yes.
strong legislature, and you're exactly right. Rex does a wonderful job for Pickens County down there. Is there any measure that could be put forward to split the Senate? A staggered election, 2 years on, 2 years off, because right now they all run as a block. Every senator runs at the same time, 4 years. Would it be possible to have half run, 2 years, 2 years later, the other half run, to kind of split the block?
That's the first time I've been asked that question, so I guess I'd have to...
keep a 4-year term.
4-year term, but staggered.
Stagger the
Stagger
elections.
23, and then 2 years later, other 23.
Right.
That's the first time I've ever gotten that question, so I guess I'd have to give it some thought before I gave you a commitment on that.
When the original Constitution of South Carolina, that's the way it was. Sometime in the 60s,
Mhm.
it changed. Would it be possible to go back to that?
I'm certainly open to that. I'm certainly open to that. That's a good suggestion. But I'd have to give it some thought before I made a commitment to it. Thank you for that. I'm all for term limits. I'm all for term limits, but I don't think you ought to. I don't think members should self-term limit. As long as y'all keep electing Rex Rice, he needs to stay in the Senate, because the Senate is based on seniority, and the rules of the Senate. You can't be punished in the Senate. You choose your committees based on seniority. And the highest ranking majority party chairs that committee. I do support term limits, but I think you can support term limits without imposing it on yourself. But I do support term limits. I think probably 12 years would be a good cap on the legislature.
I guess it would be a constitutional change then, right?
No, it's just be legislation. I have co-sponsored term limits.
Okay. So you would just say 12 years, and you would also do that in the House?
I think 12 years, maybe 14, maybe 10, but I'm just
why don't, I mean, it's been proposed. Why doesn't it pass? I mean, because when Truman, no, listen, when Harry Truman was term limited, they term limited the President of the United States. I mean, Harry Truman was grandfathered, So what I would suggest, instead of just putting up a term limit bill, I would grandfather all the current members. And I know that doesn't get you what you want right now, but over a period of time it will, and it would actually pass, I think.
It's a good suggestion.
And you could just use, the example where they did it with the President. I mean, Truman was not term limited.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion, is to
I mean,
grandfather.
I'd love to term limit them all now, but that's just not going to happen.
Yeah,
Just
well, it'd be a field goal instead of a touchdown. To grandfather all the current legislature, and the new ones would be term limit. That's a good idea. I appreciate you bringing that up. Great.
Governor, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
One more question. You mentioned, about the corruption in the Senate, and I'm going to kind of pressure this pretty hard. Right now, we've got 1 or 2 senators or 1 or 2 representatives that we don't even elect, who controls the grand majority of the money that gets dispersed in our state. For instance, Hugh Leatherman. He controls, I would say he controls, everybody would agree here that he controls most of the money, being in charge of the Finance Committee. And we don't even elect him. We have no way of being able to put him out of office. So what's the solution to that? How do we take that away from the legislature? You mentioned taking power away from the legislature and taking us away from a legislative state. How do you do that as the governor?
Well, here again, I'd start with the DOT. That's where I would start. That needs to be a cabinet agency. The people want it. If the people put enough pressure on the legislature, I believe we'll get it. And as long as I'm a candidate, I'm going to be pushing for it. And if I'm your next governor, I'm going to be pushing for it. And if I'm not your next governor, I'm going to be an activist pushing for it. Make the DOT a cabinet agency. The people want it. And if they put enough pressure on the legislature, we'll get it.
For instance, President Pro Tem of the Senate. I don't know, maybe that's a seniority issue.
No, the President Pro Tem is elected by the body.
Right. And so could that not be term limited as well, to where you don't have a Hugh Leatherman who can be the president pro tem, the finance chairman? What other chairmanships does he hold? I mean, last I heard he held 2 or 3.
State Infrastructure Bank comes with that. The a lot of influence on
he
the
pretty
DOT.
much controls everything that has to
Right.
do with finance. So, I mean, understanding that he's established, and like Alex said, I completely agree. Grandfathering him in, that's one way to get it passed. But I think that anything that had anything to do with term limits should also have to do with term limiting your office within the Senate or the House as well.
Well, you know, I am for term limits, but if I had to choose my battles, I believe my primary battle is going to be getting away from the legislative state. I do support term limits too.
Until we can change that, we just got to make sure Rex stays down there long
Yes.
enough to get that position when Leatherman leaves, and then we can get some of the goodie up here instead of Florence, right?
Or you could move to Pamplico. The roads are great down there.
What happened really, it was McConnell and Bobby Harrell, and all
Charleston.
the money flew to Charleston, and then they rolled out of there, and now it's Jay Lucas, and the money flows to the PD, and
I'm telling you, I'm in the upstate. I'm from the upstate. I'm not gonna try to get everything in the upstate. I'm going to represent the whole state. I'm not gonna. We haven't had an upstate governor since Carroll Campbell, but I'm not gonna pander to you up here and say I'm going to use this position to benefit the upstate. But here again, the key is cabinet agency, statewide elected office. You know who to hold accountable, and that's how your roads are going to get fixed.
What we need is a separation of powers in our state government.
Yes, exactly. It's that simple.
It's absolutely.
Sure.
Talk to the mic. Wait for the microphone.
What issues differentiate you from the other candidates running?
I've got a 12-year crystal clear conservative record. I run a small business. I understand health care. And everything you hear me say, I've got actions in I got a record that'll back it up. That's the main differences. And I'm not aware of other candidates pushing this hard to get away from the legislative state. I'm willing to take the challenge. I know it's a mountain. It's a big mountain, but we've got to do it. We've got to do it. I can't speak for any other candidates, and maybe some may have addressed this. And there's some good people running. I don't have anything personal against any of them, but I believe I have the strongest position on the legislative state, and I do have an experience in the legislature, small business, health care.
Could we go back to finances one more time?
Sure.
The pension, the state employee pension. We are billions of dollars behind. Anyway, how would you reform it? What do we need to do going forward to handle it?
First of all, let me tell you how we got here. Depends on how you look at the numbers. The low end may be $25 billion. The high end would be $40 billion unfunded liability, which is debt of our pension system. How did we get here? Several times the legislature have increased the benefits without doing the math. That's one thing. They've created programs like Terry. Y'all remember Terry was to retain seasoned teachers, and then a state employee took the Terry to court, and the court said you have to give this to every state employee. That's broken the system. The legislature passed a bill last year that did a couple of things. One, it gave the Investment Commission a little more flexibility, and they are going to show a fairly decent return this year, and it did increase the contributions to pay that bill. But what that bill contained was an amendment that said every new hire would be on a defined contribution instead of a defined benefit. Now, even if you wanted to, you can't start taking benefits away from a retiree or a vested employee. But the bill only went halfway. And the unfortunate thing is all the stakeholders were behind the bill. The State Employees Association and the Retirees Association were behind the bill, and they would have taken the defined contribution had it been in that big package. Tom Davis was up here not too long ago, and he offered the amendment in the Senate that did just that. That it said every new hire would be a defined contribution. Well, Now, it was in the Senate version, and it was not in the House version, and it went to conference committee, and the conference committee took it out. And I wish that bill had gotten a veto and insisted on the legislature come back with a package that pays the bill and gets new hires on a defined contribution. That's what should have happened. I do support getting new hires on defined contribution. It's going to be much harder to do it now than it would have been then, but that's what we've got to do. Yes, sir.
Let me plant a seed there.
Please do.
Like I said, I worked for Duke Power for 30 years. After I'd been working for them for about 15 years, they did what you said couldn't be done. They come up and said, you're no longer under this defined. We had two. We had a 401k we contributed to, and then we had a defined benefit. Mm-hmm. They came up and said, we're taking that away. And they had billions of dollars. But when they did that, they said, well, instead of that, we're going to give you a lump sum amount of cash to start out with, depending on your age, time with the company, how much you're paid. And we raised hell. You're taking this away from us. You know, what you promised, you're taking it away. It was the best thing that ever happened to it. You can't talk to anybody that came under that program where they put that amount of money in there and then they contributed to it and you contributed to it and it just built and built and built. And the beauty of that is if you don't need that or if you die a month after you retire, that money is still there for you or your children to go on down the line. They used all that money that they got by doing that, by putting these lump sums in there, and they went out and bought lots of extra power companies, and that's the reason they're the biggest power producer in the United States today. Well, I know y'all got a big debt, so it's kind of looking at it from a different direction, but I think that if you could offer the existing employees and convince them and show and go to Duke Power and find out how it worked for them and say, okay, we'll put this much money in there instead of you having this benefit that we promised you, and we're going to add to it every year, and that's going to do away with your debt. There's a big debt that you've got that's going to do away with that. You won't have that money to go out and spend, right. But it can get rid of your debt.
There are proposals similar to what you're suggesting that would go to what we call a hybrid plan, which is partial defined benefit, partial defined contribution, where you still contributing to the unfunded liability and kind of phase it out. Similar to what you're saying, but that's a different approach to it, and I'll certainly take a note of that. Thank you for that.
Any more questions? Well, I have enjoyed this.
Well, I have too. I've appreciated all the questions, and I appreciate y'all's involvement, and I appreciate y'all's commitment to the cause of conservatism. You know the left is energized more than ever. Just turn on MSNBC and CNN and just take a look for yourself. But thank y'all for being committed to conservatism, and hopefully someday we can come up here to Pickens and say that your government has been returned to you, the taxpayer.
And sometime between now and Election Day, or more than once, you are welcome to come back.
Love to.
And we'll do it again.
Sure.
And I'm going to, I have no idea how this will pan out, but I'm going to offer a joint town hall between you and Catherine or the governor or anybody that wants to come.
Sure.
And have a nice time. I don't want to oversell this or sound sappy about it, but this is about as homey a atmosphere, one-on-one, close-up and personal as you can get in a barbecue place, this close to people answering their questions instead of a reporter or somebody. These are actually the people that are voting, and I think to me, their questions and concerns hold more value than anybody else's would. So, well,
I enjoy back and forth. I've learned some things from y'all tonight. We have a lot of sharp minds in this room, and I appreciate all the questions and I appreciate all the suggestions. And it's been an honor to be here, and I appreciate my time with y'all. Really do.
It's our honor.
Thank you.